What's up guys, it is Carly here back with another video, and today I'm going to be discussing a few books again. Yes, I made a video probably a few months ago now where I kind of just did a brief little review or just talk about of some Goosebumps TV books, and I'm going to be doing the same type of thing right now, but this time I'm going to be talking about three just popular Goosebumps books, or just ones that are kind of nostalgic to me because they're ones that I grew up reading, and they're also, I think they are kind of more of the popular ones, except two of them definitely are. One of them is popular in my opinion, but I don't think it was, one of the most widely talked about. But those books today are going to be Say Cheese and Die, The Haunted Mask, and The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. So yeah, I know, Haunted Mask and Say Cheese and Die, those are the obvious classics here. And then Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, this is another one that I just, I always saw it at the stores and, the library at school. And I think my grandma actually just had some random Goosebumps books in her house, and this was one of them. And I think that's where I read this for the first time. But yeah, so I figured I would just do a brief little talk about these books. I know Say Cheese and Die is book number 4 because, conveniently it has it on the spine here. I'm not too sure about The Haunted Mask. I want to say this is book number 11 or something like that. I know it was kind of farther up on the list than I was thinking, just because it's one of the more popular ones, as well as the TV show. So I was thinking it was one of the lower down first ones, but I could have sworn when I looked it up it was like number 11 or something along those lines, which is still kind of an earlier book because there's about 60 or some Goosebumps books, but not too 100% sure on this one. I didn't look it up beforehand, but I have looked it up in the past. And then Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, I believe this is number 20. I think it says in the back of the book here that it is number 20, so this is kind of, a little later on. Of course, I do look these all up so I could put them in order on my shelf, but guess we'll just start with the more recent one here. These are just books that I've, of course, picked up at Goodwills and stuff like that, so it's not like I have the entire collection, and that's why they're kind of just random books, but figured it makes sense to talk about the ones that I'm kind of nostalgic for. So Say Cheese and Die, the storyline with this one is you have this group of friends. They go to this weird place, and they find, they're not supposed to be there, but they go inside, and there's some weird stuff in it, and the one kid finds this neat looking camera. It's just very kind of unique looking, and so the guy who allegedly lives at the place shows up and scares them off, and the kid still has the camera on him, and at first they think it's kind of cool, and he starts taking pictures, and the pictures just aren't turning out to be the photos that he took. They're turning out to be kind of these sinister versions of what he's actually taking a picture of. Like, he takes a picture of his friend standing on the stairs, and the picture comes out as his friend falling down the stairs, and then before you know it, the friend actually does fall down the stairs, and then he takes a picture of his other friend, and she's not in the picture, and then later on she kind of disappears. So all this stuff is just kind of, it just seems like the camera is bad luck, or can predict the future, or can cause a bad future. Like maybe these events aren't supposed to happen, but the camera is causing them to happen. So he of course gets a little leery, and he wants to take the camera back, and then when they take the camera back, there's a little bit of an issue there too. So that's what's going on in this book. This is one that I believe I read multiple times when I was a kid. I have mentioned before that I didn't really read all these books when I was a kid like some people did. I wasn't overly into them. I was more of a Junie B. Jones type of person myself around that time, but this is one that I definitely remember reading a few times, and I did like it. It's definitely not my favorite story, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's a decent story and one of the better, more solid Goosebumps stories, but for whatever reason, just the storyline isn't my favorite. I've always found this one to be a little more cheesy, and it's kind of funny because all the books, when you really think about it, the stories are all pretty cheesy, but this one just struck me as extra cheesy, no pun intended with it being Say Cheese and Die, but that's just kind of always how I felt about it. And I recently, you know, picked up the DVD of it at a Goodwill. I happened to find it, and I did watch that, and that of course was super cheesy as well, but it did go along with the book pretty well, and I thought that was kind of interesting to get to watch it so close to when I actually read the story. So that was pretty cool, but overall, I think this story is pretty solid. I could see why it's one of the more popular ones, but you know, if I had to really rate the books that I have read, this probably wouldn't be one of my favorites. I have always liked the original cover art here, though. It's kind of creepy with the, you know, skeleton family. It's definitely classic cover art, so that is kind of how I feel about that one. I'm not really going to rate these books because, you know, it's kind of hard to just rate these kids' books, but moving along, we have The Haunted Mask, and once again got this at a Goodwill, and that day there happened to be a lot of different books there. I actually picked this one up, and Scarecrow Walks at Midnight that day, but I didn't pick up a lot of the other ones because my book stack was kind of getting out of control. But I almost kind of regret grabbing this because it's not the original cover art, so it doesn't really fit in that well with you know, the other ones that I have where you do have that original cover arts. But I do like this art. I've mentioned before, it almost reminds me of the Halloween 3 thing with, you know, the kids and their silhouettes walking and the just orange tinted background there. So it is cool art. It's just, I kind of wish I had the original so it would look nicer on the shelf. But anyway, Haunted Mask. Of course, the story with this one is a girl named Carly Beth. I always forget that she actually had the same name as me, except for she actually goes by her middle name too, which is kind of weird. I've never seen anyone named Carly that also goes by their middle name, but Carly Beth, she's kind of this scaredy cat girl. Everyone kind of picks on her and tries to scare her in school, her friends and just other people, and she obviously gets really upset by this, and she wishes she could get back at them really bad, but it's kind of hard for her because she is so easily frightened and everyone else kind of has the upper hand on her. So she goes to this weird costume store one night, and she is desperately looking for something that's gonna really be scary and kind of out of the box and just not what the other kids are wearing, so that she can scare the heck out of her friends on Halloween night when they are trick-or-treating. She goes into the store, she's looking around, she's not that interested, and then she happens upon a room in the back where, oh, sorry if you heard that, I think that was a motorcycle or something, but not sure if that picked up on the camera, but anyway, she goes to the store, she ends up in the back and sees all these grotesque looking masks. The store owner, of course, is kind of weird about it, and he's pretty much begging her, or just telling her really that they're not for sale, and he's not going to sell it to her, and she's just kind of begging, offering to give him all this money for it, and he finally gives in and lets her take it reluctantly. She later finds out why she should not have taken the mask, because the mask actually has something weird about it, and it tries to become her face. So everyone kind of knows the story here. I feel like, you know, it's okay to kind of spoil these stories, but this is one that I've always enjoyed, definitely. For one, it's set on Halloween, so I've always liked that. Kind of like I like my horror movies, if they're set on Halloween, that's kind of just like a double positive there. So always like that. You can always picture the atmosphere with this one. It's been a while since I've actually watched the TV episode, but I have seen it before, and I do remember enjoying it as well, but I really can't remember it too well, if I'm being completely honest. That would be a cool one to find and own, but I do enjoy this story. You know, I like the characters in it, and it's really easy to kind of just picture the general Halloween atmosphere when you're reading this one, and you know, kind of picture your own mask. This is the mask on the cover, what it looks like, and I think it looks different on the original cover art as well, but you know, I always kind of picture a mask that's like just grotesque and a lot scarier, so always really enjoyed this one. And of course, another thing I forgot to mention, this has one of those endings, as well as all the Goosebumps books. They have those endings where you think everything's fine and then something happens that makes it not fine, and I've always enjoyed that about these books because it's very Twilight Zone-esque in a way, where no matter what, you're always kind of doomed. And you know, I like the ending of this one. It comes off once again, they always kind of come off as a little bit cheesy, but I find them enjoyable, and they're kind of, you know, scary just for being kids' books. So always really like The Haunted Mask. What else can I say? It's a classic book. If you have not read Haunted Mask or really any Goosebump books, this is definitely probably one of the first ones that you would want to read if you are interested in checking these books out. And then finally, guys, of course, we have The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. This one here, like I said, my grandma had this when I was growing up, so it's kind of nostalgic for me just for that reason alone. That's where I got it and kind of read it, and you know, I just always kind of had that memory associated with it. I remember I would start reading it and then get kind of uninterested. I did that a lot when I was a kid with books. I would tell myself, I'm going to start reading books again, and then I would kind of fall out of it or just read half the book and put it down, and I definitely did that with this one, but I have read it all the way through before, and I was interested in rereading it because I couldn't really remember the storyline to this one all that much. It was the most foggy in my head, and I don't think I've ever seen a TV show version of this one. You know, I think they used to put those on Cartoon Network, and I don't think I've ever actually watched it, but the story with this one is two kids. They are spending, I believe, the summer at their grandparents', and they're really excited because their grandparents are pretty cool people. They always make them good food, and their grandpa tells them scary stories at night before bed, and it's just always a fun, relaxed time when they go over there. And of course, they kind of live in the middle of nowhere, and there's this kind of weird dude named Stanley who I think he, you know, works for them, and then he has a son too who's also kind of more just like a troublemaker type of kid and always is picking on these other two kids, so they're living there as well. And when they come this time though, their grandparents are kind of acting strange. They just seem more worn out and like they're frightened about something, and they're just not as fun as they used to be. Like they're serving them cereal for breakfast instead of making, you know, a home-cooked nice breakfast, and the dad or the grandpa is just kind of falling asleep really early, not interested in really telling them any stories. So they're kind of weirded out, and they are suspecting that something's up with Stanley and his son. They think the son is maybe trying to screw with them, and Stanley is into this book of, I guess, magic that he has, and you know, he's always saying like the scarecrows walk at midnight and stuff like that, and it's just really weird. So later on in the book, they come to discover that the scarecrows actually might be walking at midnight. So that's kind of the story with that one. You know, killer, or not really killer, but alive scarecrows. That's kind of what you got going on here. And this is another one that I've always really enjoyed just because of the plot and the location in the story. I've always loved watching movies and just reading books where they're set in the middle of nowhere, because once again, it's an atmosphere type of thing. I just really like things that are set in the middle of nowhere. That's why I always like road horror movies, because I feel like a lot of them are set kind of in deserted locations. And you know, this book kind of gives you definitely that Children of the Corn type of vibe, because it's set with scarecrows and corn stalks and just in that same type of atmosphere. So I've always enjoyed that about it. I also like that the kids are at their grandparents and they get kind of, they like going over there for the summers. I just think that's nice whenever you portray the grandparents' house is a fun place to be. And yeah, I just really enjoy the story. I'm glad that I gave it a chance when I was a kid, because I don't know, I think I always just kind of got bored with it, and then finally I read it and I was like, oh, this is pretty good, and it became one of my favorite ones. So yeah, the story is pretty good. The ending, reading it this time around, for some reason I felt like I was reading it and kind of daydreaming, reading the entire end of the book. So I kind of forget what the ending, how it all kind of wraps up, and I just finished this one recently. Actually, it was the most recent one that I read about a week ago. So but it's for whatever reason kind of foggy in my memory, but it is one that I really enjoy, just once again for the location alone, and you can really get behind the characters. Again, I don't really know the actual television episode, what it's like or anything like that. I might have seen it, bits and pieces, but I just don't really remember to really comment on that, but really enjoy this one too. So yeah, that'll do it for this one, guys. Just thought I would talk about these 3 books here because, like I said, it's nostalgic books, and I thought doing 3 at a time is easier than reading an entire series of books. And also I don't have the entire series of books, but I do have some other Goosebumps books. I do have the Monster Blood books, all 3 of them in just one big book. I found that at Goodwill and I thought that was pretty cool, so I'll probably do a separate video on those. And I also want to talk about, you know, the Fear Street books and maybe some Stephen King books, so those will probably be a little easier to talk about too, because they're not just cookie cutter kid books, the Stephen King books I mean. That would be easier to kind of give a review on, and if I've seen the movies, kind of do a comparison of that. But anyway guys, that'll do it for this episode of, I guess, random book reviews is what I am calling this little series I'm doing. So thank you guys once again for joining me, and as always, I will see you in the next video.